There is a wound within us that doesn't bleed to the eyes, but screams in the soul. It has no bandage, no stitches, no sick leave. It's the invisible wound that hides behind forced smiles, impulsive gestures, and dense silences. It's the emotional, psychic, spiritual wound. And perhaps more dangerous than the wound itself is the fact that we don't even know it's there, subtly controlling our every move with the brutal delicacy of someone who wounds others without even realizing it. Have you ever wondered why, sometimes, you hurt the very people you love the most? Why, despite your deepest desire to get closer, you end up pushing them away? Why your words come out twisted, sharp, as if your mouth were an emotional furnace? Maybe you're trying to hold a rose, forgetting that the thorn might be you. There's an old, magical, poetic film about a young man with scissor hands who created masterpieces with his touch. Ice sculptures that seemed to dance, topiaries that looked alive. Yet every time he tried to touch the ones he loved most, he ended up cutting them, not out of malice, but because his hands, his tools, were blades. We are just like him, wounded beings who, with emotionally sharpened hands, long for affection, but often offer pain. No one is born wanting to hurt. The primal desire of the human being is affection, connection. The baby seeks arms, the adult love, the elder belonging. But when affection doesn't come as it should, or comes mixed with pain, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, it transforms, and the soul learns a confusing language. Where to love means to fear, where to give means to lose, where drawing close means risking bleeding once again. Psychoanalysis teaches us that whatever is not processed, not symbolized, is repeated. We become repeaters of poorly healed stories. We are the children of unspoken pain, of muffled trauma, of unconscious memories that hijacked us without warning. The wounded don't hurt others because they are cruel. The wounded hurt because the pain inside them is so alive that when touched, it reacts with aggression, defensiveness, or punishing silence. Pain becomes an extension of the self. Imagine a car speeding down the road while the driver sleeps. What drives it now is impulse, trauma, the wound. That's how the unconscious works. When we don't face our pain, it takes the wheel, and we begin to project onto others everything that lives inside us, but we're unwilling to see. The wounded person accuses, blames, manipulates, silences, or screams, and then they cry. Because deep down they know they're losing once again someone they loved. They know they're repeating an old script, but they can't escape it. They know they're being hijacked by the wounded child inside, crying out, "Look at me, see me, take care of me." That wounded child is the epicenter of many emotional disasters. They've learned that love hurts, that being vulnerable is dangerous, that trusting is a risk. So as they grow, they put on emotional armor, irony, coldness, superiority, sarcasm, control, dependency, perfectionism. All of these are defense mechanisms built by someone who was not protected when they most needed it. It's common to hear, "You made me feel this. You're the reason for my pain." But almost always, the wound that hurts was already there. It was only touched. The person who wounds us may only be pressing on an old scar, not the one who created it. The wounded project. They transfer their guilt, their pain, their fears. It's easier to yell at someone else than to dive into one's own silence. It's easier to judge than to honestly face your own shadows. It's easier to blame the world than to say,
It was me. I abandoned myself. I denied myself. I ran away from me. But there is healing. There is redemption. There is a way. And it begins the moment we stop running from ourselves. When we have the courage to say, maybe the knife is in my hand. Blaming others is paradoxically a form of self-protection. The unconscious believes that if pain comes from outside, then we don't have to deal with what's inside. But the truth is, this strategy is a prison disguised as relief. While we point fingers, we avoid looking into the mirror. And it's in the mirror, in the brutal and necessary exercise of self-knowledge, that true transformation lies. Psychological projection is one of the most treacherous mechanisms of the wounded soul. We see in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. We are deeply disturbed by behaviors that in some way reflect parts of us we've rejected. Excessive criticism, cruel judgment, intolerance often reveal more about our inner world than about the reality of the other. And behind this projection, there is always an unprocessed trauma. The wounded person lives in a constant state of defense. Any emotional closeness is viewed with suspicion. Any criticism is perceived as rejection. Any mistake from the other sets off an internal alarm of abandonment. They live reactively. They don't respond with awareness, they react with pain. Freud called this the repetition compulsion. It's as if there were an invisible force repeatedly pushing us toward the same painful situations in an unconscious attempt to rewrite the story, but always with the same script. A person who was abandoned in childhood, for example, might seek relationships where they will be abandoned again. Not out of masochism, but because the unconscious is desperately trying to find a different ending to the same narrative. But as long as there is no awareness, the ending never changes. The trauma repeats itself, replays itself, reinvents itself through new faces and new contexts, until one day the pain finally forces us to stop, to look inward, to ask ourselves, what am I trying to resolve through each new wound? That question changes everything. It marks the turning point, the moment when the role of victim gives way to self-responsibility, when pain stops being a burden and starts to become a key. True courage doesn't lie in moving forward while pretending everything is fine. True courage lies in sitting down with your pain and embracing silence and listening to what it has to say. It lies in revisiting the basements of the soul, opening the drawers of childhood, shedding light on the whys. It takes bravery to look at yourself and admit, I'm not only the one who was hurt, I also hurt. And even more, I'm not only the one who loved, I also controlled, demanded, manipulated. This is not about guilt, it's about responsibility. Guilt paralyzes. Responsibility sets you free. When we take ownership of our wounds and of the pain we've caused, we create space for transformation. The journey of self-knowledge is not a sightseeing tour. It's a crossing, often solitary, unpredictable, painful, but absolutely liberating. We must say it out loud, love can become sick too. When burdened by unhealed wounds, love becomes contaminated. It turns into dependency, obsession, control. And paradoxically, the more we try to cling to the other, the more they slip away. Because no one can carry the burden of the pain they didn't cause. No one can forever bear the weight of someone else's unmet needs. Healthy love is freedom with commitment. It's presence with respect. It's surrender with boundaries. But the love of someone wounded, when not yet healed, tends to swing to extremes. It either clings or pushes away. It either idealizes or rejects. There's a constant fear of betrayal, of being replaced, of being forgotten. And that fear corrodes the relationship, drop by drop. The shadow of love is often the unconscious repetition of old emotional bonds. If we had controlling parents, we might seek submissive partners. If we had absent parents, we may fall for people who are incapable of fully loving us. And we call this fate, but it's really just a reflection of our psyche crying out, "Help me heal." But relationships don't heal us. Relationships reveal us. They expose our wounds with surgical precision, not to destroy us, but to awaken us. The other becomes a mirror. The conflict is an invitation. The pain is a sign. There comes a time when there's nowhere left to run. You either look and win, or you keep hurting the ones you love the most. Emotional catharsis is inevitable. It's the collapse of defenses. It's when you see yourself, perhaps for the first time, in raw form. No masks, no excuses, no justifications. It's when you cry all the tears you never shed, scream what you silenced, feel what you've been numbing for years. And strangely enough, this moment, however painful, is the gateway to healing. Because there, on the floor of your own despair, you find truth, and truth sets you free. Truth disarms. Truth transforms. You begin to realize that you don't need to keep hurting, that you can learn to touch without wounding, that you can love without fear, that you can be vulnerable without falling apart. There is a profound beauty in someone who decides to heal. It is a silent revolution, an inner alchemy. The same hands that once wounded now learn to caress. The same eyes that once judged now see with compassion. The same heart that once shut down now opens. The wound does not disappear. It becomes integrated. It becomes part of your story, but no longer your prison. It becomes a scar, a memory of something that once hurt, but also a sign that healing happened. And then, just like in a movie, you discover that even with imperfect hands, you can create beauty. Even with a difficult past, you can build love. Even with trauma, you can generate life. The knife no longer cuts, it becomes a paintbrush. True healing doesn't happen when the other person changes, or when life finally gives us what we think we deserve. True healing begins when we stop putting our well-being in someone else's hands, when we take on the radical task of looking at ourselves with tenderness and brutal honesty. Healing is an act of self-love, a sacred commitment to our own story. And this path is anything but linear. Yes, you will stumble. You will deceive yourself. You'll repeat some patterns. You'll think you're fine until a trigger sends you backwards. And that's okay. It's part of the process. Healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You go back, but you don't go back the same. You repeat, but now with more awareness. And awareness changes everything. Over time, you begin to notice the signs. The same feelings arise, but you don't react like you used to. That criticism that once shattered you, now just makes you sad. The absence that once broke you, now only unsettles you. The other's silence no longer becomes your prison. You start making choices from your truth, not from your wounds. If once love was demanding, now it's presence. If once it was control, now it's offering. You no longer love to fill a void, you love to share your fullness. And then you realize it is possible to touch without hurting. At that point, something new is born. Mature love, conscious connection, a relationship where two souls, still healing, meet with honesty and kindness, no longer demanding to be saved, but walking side by side as co-creators of their own transformation. This doesn't mean perfection. It means integrity. It means being able to say, I'm still healing, but I no longer let my pain make my decisions. I no longer let my past dictate my present. I no longer project what's mine onto someone else.
At some point in the process, you will look at your wounds with gratitude. Yes, gratitude, because they were the ones who brought you to rock bottom, where you discovered your strength. They were the ones who screamed when you tried to stay silent. They were the ones who pushed you inward when the outside world stopped making sense. It begins with simple questions and ends in inner revolutions. It requires humility to recognize that even with the best intentions, we are humans, and therefore we fail. We make mistakes. We repeat patterns, but we can also change. This journey can happen through therapy, writing, meditation, art, spirituality. What matters is not running from yourself, not outsourcing your healing, not expecting someone else to fill what only you can fill. Because in the end, the knife in your hand doesn't have to keep cutting. It can become a sculpting tool. Like the young man with scissor hands who created beauty despite his limitation, you too can create beauty from your scars. You can turn your pain into compassion, your story into inspiration, your vulnerability into connection. We all carry a child within us, a part that never matured because it was frozen in time. It's not uncommon that, in moments of conflict, the one steering the emotional ship isn't the rational adult we know ourselves to be, but that child, vulnerable, needy, insecure, starving for love and recognition. That wounded child is the one who was not heard, not validated, not protected. Sometimes they were emotionally, physically, or psychologically abused. Other times, they were simply ignored in their most basic needs. They felt alone in a crowd, invisible among smiling faces. So they learned to protect themselves in the only ways they could. Some became hard, others submissive, some shut down, others became compulsive people pleasers. Each built their own shield. The problem is, the same shields that once served to protect now keep love out. It's that child who cries when you feel jealous. It's them who panics when someone walks away. It's them who screams when you feel rejected. It's not the adult reacting with emotional chaos. It's the wounded child within saying, "Don't abandon me again. Don't leave me here alone like before." When you understand this, when you recognize this child within yourself, the healing begins, because finally, you can embrace them. And when the wounded child is embraced, the adult is no longer a hostage of the past. And then you realize that the wound was from the very beginning a bridge, a passage to a more authentic, more human, more true to you place. Pain, when embraced, transforms into wisdom. Guilt, when understood, becomes compassion. Trauma, when healed, becomes a mission. You begin to see that you can help others, that your story can be a lighthouse, that your scar can be a map for those still feeling lost. And in doing so, you return to the world a bit of the healing you received, not as a guru, but as a human, a wounded soul in process, an imperfect being who chose to take responsibility for both their light and shadow. You don't have control over everything you've lived through, but you are responsible for what you do with it. Pain doesn't have to be your legacy. You can break the cycle. You can choose not to hurt others anymore. You can even walk away from those who still live with the knife in hand, because a person in denial of their own pain can cut you too, without even realizing it. And distance, sometimes, is also love. Self-love. Love for your mental health. Love for life. It is possible to forgive without staying close. It is possible to understand without accepting. It is possible to love and still say, I can't allow your pain to keep hurting me. This kind of awareness is not coldness. It is emotional maturity. It is the wisdom of someone who has learned that the love we have for others should never be greater than the love we have for ourselves. The image of the young man with scissors for hands, which accompanied us through this journey, is perhaps one of the most beautiful metaphors for what it means to be human. He wanted to love. He wanted to care. He wanted to belong. But his hands would cut. Not out of cruelty, but because that's how they were made. And that is the tragedy and beauty of being human. We want to do good, but sometimes we hurt. We want to get close, but we self-sabotage. We want to love, but we're afraid. The salvation of that young man wasn't in amputating his hands, but in learning to use them with awareness. In understanding that his difference was also his gift, that his limitation could be transcended through art, through surrender, through the beauty he was capable of creating. And just like him, we don't need to be perfect. We need to be conscious. The knife in your hand can be a weapon or a flower. It can cut or it can heal. It can push away, or it can unite. The choice is yours. It always was. And perhaps the real question that remains after this journey is, what will you do with the pain that once wounded you? Will you keep passing it on? Or will you transform it into poetry? Only you can answer that. But know this, the world is full of wounded souls, just waiting for someone to have the courage to begin the healing within themselves. Let that someone today be you. Healing is a return to yourself, to the forgotten parts, to the essence that survived the chaos. Many of us imagine healing as a destination, a place where we'll finally be okay, complete, resolved. But it's not exactly like that. Healing is a continuous process, a way of being in the world with more presence, more listening, and above all, more truth. And the truth is, all of us, in some way, have been the boy with scissors for hands. All of us at some point have held the knife, even without meaning to hurt. We've all bled, and we've all made someone bleed. And admitting that doesn't make us monsters. It makes us human. The difference between continuing to hurt or beginning to heal lies in one decision. The decision to no longer live on autopilot of pain. The decision to stop justifying, to stop projecting, to stop running, to stop blaming others. It's when we choose to pause and feel.
It's when we take a deep breath and, even afraid, dare to look within. This process requires courage. And courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is walking despite the fear. It's choosing responsibility even when it would be easier to blame the world. It's saying, "Enough. I don't want to repeat this cycle anymore." And from that moment, something new is born. A new identity, less shaped by pain, more connected to love. And no, this new identity is not perfect. It still makes mistakes, still feels jealousy, still gets irritated. But it no longer reacts blindly. It no longer destroys in impulse. It no longer pushes away when what it wants is closeness. It has learned to pause, to observe itself, to care for itself. And maybe that is one of the great silent revolutions. Learning to care for yourself emotionally. Learning to be the adult you needed when you were a child. Learning to hold yourself when you slip. To embrace yourself when you are afraid. To remember that you are in a process and that in this process, every step matters. You begin to build healthier relationships. Not because you found perfect people, but because you stopped expecting others to fix your internal fractures. You no longer love to fill your voids. You love to overflow. And if the other can't walk with you, you no longer try to change them. You simply accept and move forward. This emotional freedom is one of the greatest achievements of the healing journey. It allows you to live with more lightness, with more truth, with more presence. It allows you to show up whole, no longer as pieces held together by the hope of being saved. And maybe this is the true miracle, to look back at everything that hurt and realize that you survived, that despite it all, you still have the capacity to love, that despite the wounds, you still believe in connection, that even after bleeding, you still want to touch the world with gentleness. You are no longer just the wounded. You have also become the healer. And that changes everything. Healing is one of the purest ways to honor life. It is a quiet act of respect for your own story, for the pain you felt, for the tears you hid, for the screams no one heard. When you choose to look at yourself with honesty, without guilt, without victimhood, you break chains that have crossed generations. Because the pain you don't heal, you pass on. This is a psychic truth, almost spiritual. Unhealed wounds seek to stay alive through bonds, through repetition, through emotional patterns. But when you become conscious of your pain, you become a kind of emotional alchemist. You interrupt the cycle. You choose a new language to love. And the most beautiful part of it all is that healing is never solitary, even when you walk alone. Because as you heal, you also heal the world around you. You improve your relationships. You soften your words. You humanize your affections. You become a shelter, not a storm. You become a bridge, not a wall. When you realize the knife was in your hand, you don't fall into guilt. You step into responsibility, and that changes the entire tone of the journey. Guilt paralyzes. Responsibility frees. It invites you to create a new future with awareness, with choices aligned not with who pain taught you to be, but with who you want to become. So, if there's anything to take from this, let it be this subtle truth. Who recognizes they hurt because they were hurt is ready to be the beginning of something new. You are not the pain that shaped you. You are the strength that chose to transform it. And that is deeply revolutionary and beautifully human.
If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.